There is some misconception around Demarchism, even to the point where some slanderous detractors will even say, well, it's basically democratic anarchism. Even though the very first self-proclaimed Demarchist actually had no idea what anarchism actually was, and not only that, had a very distorted view of anarchism. But to be clear, Demarchists are no enemies of anarchists, as Demarchists got to know anarchists more. Now, Demarchism is very repressed. Largely repressed by aristocrats that say they're anarchists, and aristocrats that say that they're Marxists. Social media has not let a lot of things come through. Had there not been social media, I actually can guarantee that Demarchism would have spread on the web a lot quicker. Although Demarchism, and this is important to understand, while the word was conceived of in the United States, those that identify with Demarchism are throughout the world. And these are things that can be proven. The problem is that will people let us even speak? I don't hold my breath on that. But I am one lone voice that will give you some insight. There are 12 principles of Demarchism. These principles, some of them you'll be more familiar with, some of them you won't, and some I'll give exposition to and some I'll gloss over. However, there will be more details in time aside from this video. This is the first summary. Alright, the first principle is cosmopolitanality. Cosmopolitanality refers to the nature of those following cosmopolitanal law. This is in fact about the recognition of the other. It's also considered essential in destroying class division. Number 2, world transcendentalism. World transcendentalism is what is to replace secularism, because secularism is the culture of capitalism. Secularism is capitalism, capitalism is secularism. This is one of the reasons why we don't call ourselves communists, because anarchist and Marxist are communist, and communist, while I know what communist means to communism, to Demarchists, the term communist refers to secular socialists, therefore contradictory socialists. And no, this is not a cry for theocracy. Theocracy is not the point. World transcendentalism is not theocracy. Number 3, direct democracy. So when you hear the word Demarchism, you have to think of people who are fighting for direct democracy, which is what a lot of anarchists claim that they're fighting for, and yet they insist on calling it anarchy. I'm not saying anything against my anarchist friends. You all know that I love you, despite our severe disagreements at times. If you recall, there's a lot of agreement as well. Particularly in distrust towards the state. Although, I would maintain, as pretty much most Demarchists would, that the anarchist way of toppling the state is still utopian as ever. But direct democracy is the third principle of Demarchism. The fourth principle of Demarchism is national cultural autonomy. National cultural autonomy refers to the autonomy of nations without the state's intervention. The nation-state was invented by Hegel. Marxists still use this paradigm. In fact, anarchists do as well. In fact, when you look at it, nations have never been states. This comes from Hegel. And so while a lot of people will credit the nationalist revolutions as liberatory, I would say no, they were regressive. This is one of the big disagreements that Demarchists have with the Marxist version of historical materialism, which Demarchists still accuse, including myself, of being way too linear. The fifth principle of Demarchism is unionism. Now, when we think of unions, you think more in the vein of cooperatives. And the sixth principle of Demarchism is communitarianism. When you think of communitarianism, you really should think of, communitarianism, but there is a socialist concept of that as well. And I could give more exposition on that, but I don't want to piss off other Demarchists if I say the wrong terms. The seventh principle of Demarchism is revolutionary intercommunalism, which I will not give any expedition for. This is actually upheld by a lot of Maoists and anarchists as well, so moving on. The eighth principle of Demarchism is the urban scholar. I am an urban scholar. An urban scholar is one that will borrow from academia if necessary, but ultimately wishes to topple academia for the institution that it is, because it is an institution of control, which robs the common man and woman of voice. Number 9 is Anti-Westernism. Now, to be clear here, there is no West, there is no East. It is Western ideology that creates this division, hence Anti-Westernism. And my good friend, the Stone Soviet, aka the Lumpen Third Worldist, would also tell you that the real physical conflict is between the North and the South, and he's absolutely correct when he says that. Westernism is something that must be destroyed. It infects both Marxism and anarchism consistently, which is again why we don't refer to ourselves as communists, although we refer to ourselves as socialists, because communism is Western. Now, of course, a lot of Marxists and anarchists are going to get very triggered by that. I mean no offense to you, but obviously there are differences between us, so I might as well be honest about those differences. Number 10, religionism. Now, religionism refers to the concept of keeping religions separate. That means you can't hold two religions, you can't do that. So, for instance, there's no such thing as a Jewish Christian or a Muslim Christian or a Jewish Muslim. Like these things don't exist. There are no Jewish Christians, there are no Jewish Muslims, there are no Muslim Christians, and there are no Jewish Muslims. These things don't exist. Just as you wouldn't say that, Jain Buddhist, when Jain and Buddhists, while they're related, they're not the same. Or Hindu Sikh, while there's a lot of similarities, Sikhs would find lots of contentions with the way Hindus view stuff and vice versa. So, I just mentioned the 3 Abrahamic religions and the 4 Dharma religions all at once. But religionism is that respect of the differences of the religions, not the same thing as racism where you're trying to cause division, but the respect. And that's because religiosity is a matter of orientation, just the same way that heterosexuality, homosexuality, and bisexuality, that's all orientation, meaning that it is not so much a choice, it more is. My Jewishness, my Judaism, is a matter of orientation. It is not some choice. Number 11 is interfaith. In order to have a democratic society where both those upholding religion and those that are even without religion coexist with one another, in the second principle of world transcendentalism, you need this 11th principle of interfaith. Interfaith does not mean, again, the previous principle, that being the 10th principle, is religionism. But there's also this 11th principle, interfaith. I am a Jewish Orthodox person, all right? But I am also an interfaith cleric. I work with a lot of religious groups. So I am, in fact, what you would call an interfaith cleric. And I do understand how interfaith dialogue works. It's, in fact, one of my major specialties, not the only one. And the 12th and final principle of Demarchism, which several Maoists have adopted now, finally, is dialectical reciprocity. Now, when I say several Maoists, I don't mean all Maoists. But a lot of them have adopted this, particularly the ones that refer to themselves as Maoist Third Worldists, which I do agree is a 4th stage, actually, because I see Maoism as lacking, and I see the only ones with a lack of the chauvinism that, yes, even Maoists suffer with are the Third Worldists, because I agree with the multipolarism, because which is why many of us, including Comrade Number 3, have gone out of our way to endorse the Third Worldists, such as Jason Unruh. But this 12th principle, dialectical reciprocity, refers to exactly what it sounds like if you understand dialectics. It's the reciprocity, respect to friend, opponent, ally, and such in a dialectical manner. Dialectics referring to placing the word to the form. So, for instance, the word religionism is typically not used the way that I had just recently referenced it. However, dialectically, the way that I have referenced it is correct. That meaning the way that it has always been said particularly has been incorrect, but the way that I've referenced it is correct because I'm being dialectical with the term. So dialectical reciprocity also means that we get past certain barriers of nuance of language. There's a bunch of terms in both Marxism and anarchism that are culturally offensive to the majority of people on Earth, particularly those that they would call the proletariat. Demarchism is the only concept that has philosophically sought to get past this. There is no Marxist or anarchist tendency that has even tried. Now, in dialectical reciprocity, you could say, yes, well, Comrade Ned, I actually disagree with you, so no. Fine, we could have that out, but I am not here to debate. And it's not that I won't debate, it's that I'm not here for tension. But that's dialectical reciprocity, which has been adopted by the Third Worldists, which are philosophically superior to all other versions of Marxism and superior to anarchism. And yes, I'm saying fourth stage Marxist-Leninist Maoist Third Worldists. They are the only that's the only Marxist position that has universally across the board embraced dialectical reciprocity. Now, if you point out, well, the LCO is no longer Third Worldist. I am going to say that. You know, it hasn't been Third Worldist for a while. And Third Worldism is just a word, and Jason has tried to talk about that before as well. Anyway, so that's it. I will leave you with a phrase that is said in PSM, which originally was a joke. It was actually a joke originally, but it became an actual rallying cry. Hail, comrade. But the full phrase is, hail, comrade, and hail you.